Must have been 1948, 49, somewhere around there. And they had spotted some strange aircraft functioning up around Greenland, way up in the northern hemisphere. And he was assigned to be the pilot. There were two teams, a pilot, co-pilot, and navigator, that would spell each other to fly this plane full of these scientists up to Greenland. And they were out over the North Atlantic about 2 o'clock in the morning. They'd been refueled already, and they were flying. And the co-pilot looks out of the window, and he looks down, and they were over the North Atlantic. He said, "Wait a second. What's that? What are those lights down there? It looks like a little town of some kind." He said, "That can't be true. We're way out of the North Atlantic." They recomputed where their course was, and he said, "No, we're out of it." Just as they realized that they couldn't be over in the little town, all of a sudden these lights just kind of swooshed up in front of them, and it was this gigantic UFO. I said, "This is Bethune is telling me this story, right? There's this huge UFO just right in front of their plane, and he thought they were going to hit it. And so he noses the plane over. It must have been like a B-29 or a B-49 or something. He nosed the plane over immediately and went into this dive and then leveled off. And the UFO just backed off and just came back and was still hovering right in front of them like that.
Defying laws of physics.
And so he turned to the co-pilot and said, "Look, that was a really steep dive I just did. And I need to go back and check on all of our passengers and make sure they're okay." He says, "You take the control." So he gets up and he goes back into the passenger panel. And 11 of the scientists were all glued to the windows, stuck to the side of the thing, looking at this UFO that was sitting off on the port side right over there. And they were all looking at it. And there was this one guy standing in the aisle with his back turned to everybody. Just arms folded, standing in the aisle. And General Bethune went over to him and said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he said, "Yes, I'm fine." And Bethune said, "Did you see that out there? You see what's out there?" And the scientist guy turned to him and said, "I'm a scientist. I don't believe in those things. I'm not looking." Bethune told me that story. He said, and that's sort of the way they are. The people are just saying, "Look, I don't want to believe in that. It doesn't fit into my worldview. I'm not looking."
And that's religious. It is.
Well, it's a religion, really, to back up a little bit, the evolution of the intellect in Homo sapien, which we're so proud about, that distinguishes us. The Latin root of the intellect is intellectus, which is the ability to distinguish the difference between. That's what it means. Our ability to distinguish the difference between, that we can make linear judgments and make relative judgments of how things are far away and can compute distances, et cetera, mathematically. Religion, the Latin root of religion is relegare, which is to relink. And intellectus is the ability for us to distinguish ourselves separate and apart from everything else in the universe, and that we can then start to compute how our relationship is to everything so we can control it and manipulate it, right? Relegare is to relink us back together so that our consciousness that appears to be separate and apart from everything else can link back in to the unified field of all consciousness in the universe, and so that religion is something much more profound, actually, than just a series of social or cultural beliefs. But the problem is that the latter have come to be substituted for true religion. That what they call it civic religion. That here, our country, right or wrong, it's that Christian nationalism. That our country has been endowed by the God of Jacob, Abraham and Jacob, and that we're the preeminent country of the world, and we're destined to all that stuff. That's civil religion, they call that. It's not the same thing as metaphysical consciousness. It's a different thing. It's its own thing, and there's value when you figure that that of course all the Christian churches, of course, began as the Catholic Church. I mean, before the Protestant Reformation.
That's right.
Right, and so that in the Catholic Church, that what they did is they just decided that they were going to keep all this stuff secret. All the capabilities of the human body, the kind of extra capacities that we have to levitate and to potentially bilocate.
When did they decide that? Council of Nicaea?
The Council of Nicaea, for example, struck down reincarnation. That was one of the major decisions they made, is to outlaw belief in reincarnation. But there were a lot of other belief systems that they excluded. And what they were basically telling people is that, look, the capabilities that were displayed by Jesus of Nazareth, and they wouldn't talk about Lao Tzu or the Buddha or any of the other adepts, but they say, but the Jesus, our guy, is able to transpose, water into wine. He's able to levitate. He's able to walk on water. He's able to heal people with his hands. But these are all siddha. I mean, these are fairly well-known siddha in the ancient Eastern traditions. And here's this guy that can do this in Western civilization. And what the Catholic Church has done is said, look, let's be clear. This is the only guy that can do this, right? Okay, he's our guy, and he can do this. You can't do this, okay? We're the church. We're going to intervene between you and the Godhead, and we're going to communicate to you. We're going to tell you what's going on here, okay? But you do what we tell you to do. You be good citizens. You obey Caesar. And there was the Constantinian Compromise that the Catholic Church entered into, and so the Catholic Church became an organ of the state, and that they hid a lot of these secrets about our human family and our capacities that are more exposed in the Eastern traditions, in the Hinduism and Buddhism, etc. Hinduism knows that there's something like 256 different levels of consciousness. There's all kinds of scientific writing about this in the ancient languages. So what they've done is the Catholic Church created a whole set of mythologies that when 99% of all of the people at that time were completely illiterate. I mean, they didn't travel more than 50 miles away from the point where they were born.
They had an ivory tower around information.
Didn't know anything, and so that the scholarship and knowledge and reading and stuff were all confined to the people in the church and the priests in the monasteries, etc. Okay, and so that whole hiding of the capabilities of our human family that have to do with real religion, to relinking ourselves back into unity with the consciousness of the universe. These are all things that need to also be disclosed. And that's what's going to happen here with the disclosure in general, that it's not only going to be the government of the United States is going to have to disclose secret information that's been concealing. The Catholic Church is going to have to reveal this information. And it's going to be quite disruptive over lots of people's beliefs, because they've been given such absolute terms that they have to abide by these rules and regulations. And they're going to see that they're relative rules and regulations. But that this is something that the church is going to have to come to grips with. And that they've issued a formal statement back in November 10th of 2007, where they issued a public statement saying that in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, because of the launching of the spaceborne telescopes, we had the Hubble, we had the Kepler, now we got the James Webb telescope. Said, in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, it's now become clear that much sooner than had been previously anticipated, that we're going to be discovering life elsewhere in the universe. Therefore,
than previously anticipated.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what the statement says, issued by Father Jose Gabriel Funes.
Meaning we were already anticipating it.
That's exactly right. And said that, that in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, much earlier than we had previously anticipated, we're going to be discovering life elsewhere in the universe. Therefore, the time has arrived for an extraordinarily important conversation about the profound philosophical and theological questions that are posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. Now, upon the issuance of that statement by Jose Gabriel Funes, who was the director of the Pontifical Observatory at the time, Jesuit priest, well, I contacted him and flew to see him.
In 07.
And that's right. And I said, look, We need to talk.
Look it.
We need to talk about this now. And he said, look, let's be really clear. He said, we're not talking here about the discovery of some single cell life form under some frozen sea on some distant moon in some far off galaxy. He said, we're talking about another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species right here in our own Milky Way galaxy. That's what he said. And so I've known since that time that the time has arrived, for this serious conversation among the laity. And I've been trying to figure out how to get Francis, I stay over at Doma when I'm in Rome, where Francis lives. He doesn't live in the Vatican. He won't live there for safety's sake.
Wait, he doesn't?
No, he does not. He lives in the Doma, which is a separate part.
Can we look that up?
It's on the Vatican grounds, but it's not.
Oh, so it's on the grounds.
It's not in the papal apartments.
Okay. I used to live a quarter mile from the Vatican.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
So, and so that's where he was in the Doma. And so the bottom line is that I've been there. I've talked with Johann X, who's the head of the archives, to try to talk him into letting us see these documents again. They still have not agreed to do that. But the bottom line is the church knows that it has to start mobilizing right away to start preparing people for what's getting ready to come. And that's happening now. There's huge activities going on now. Lots more. They deployed an entire carrier group down off.
A carrier group?
Yeah. The Nimitz carrier group. They deployed it down off the Baja to monitor the site down there. There's an underwater base for sure, right off Guadalupe Island, down underneath the sea.
Can we Google Guadalupe Island so we can see that?
Yeah, there's a specific spot.
You said this has to do with the church?
No, what I'm saying is that there are things happening now. There's such rapid developments that are going on now that they now know that there is this location right off Guadalupe Island between there and Baja.
That island right there on the screen.
Which one is Guadalupe?
Unless we just lost the screen.
Is Guadalupe Island. Yeah, down there's Baja. One of those. It's right there. It's which one is Guadalupe?
The little thing right there. Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, that would be it.
Got it.
Okay, so is that Guadalupe Island? Yeah, that's the one.
Like Guadalupe.
Right off that island, right there, beneath the sea. They deployed the entire the Nimitz carrier.
That's David
group.
Fravers.
Yep.
Right.
And they monitored over 100 sightings of UFOs coming and going down into the ocean right there and going down to the bottom of the ocean. And they were monitored by the submarines. That's right, monitored by the submarines underneath the water coming and going, so that there's virtually certainly a base there. And that there's another base outside of Sedona, Arizona, over by there's a place called the Secret Mountain Wilderness over there. That's just totally desolate area. There's a base there where where the craft are, and so there's a number of them high in the mountains and remote areas of the planet, and that they're here now, and that they're extraordinarily distressed. You can tell about the state of affairs right now
of humanity.
On. Yes.
Do you think that some of them possibly could be something else? And to be specific on that, I'm not saying all of them, but that some of them could be some form of advanced 40 to 60 years ahead DARPA weaponry or something like that we aren't aware of, meaning like this one outside Guadalupe, if they're going into the water right there, so close to this island where we have carrier ships and stuff like that, on something like that, more than like, say, a Sedona, Arizona example, I more think something like this at Guadalupe could involve weaponry as opposed to actual alien UFOs, if you will. You think that's possible?
No, if you phrase it that way, is it conceivable? There's a lot of things that are conceivable. But that's not how you really conduct an investigation. What you do is you work from probability projections, and you work out from that. That it's quite clear to me that that facility off Guadalupe is in fact a base, an extraterrestrial base. Because the way that the carrier group has been acting, that they dig in and monitor that thing and monitor it under the water and keep track of it and keep records of what's going on, that would not be being done with one of our own weapon systems. But the one in Sedona, on the other hand, there's U.S. military personnel all around that place, and there's helicopters. They're Apache helicopters and others that are disposed, and they accompany the coming and going of these big triangles that fly in and out of there. And that they're witnesses that we've interviewed that say that there are tall whites or tall grays there, along with what they call the mantis people. The mantis people are huge, 7 feet tall, extraordinarily skinny, thin, kind of bowed over people. They remind people of praying mantises. That this particular species,
like Sean Bradley,
no, not that bad. No, some people refer to these people as insectoids.
Insectoids.
Yeah, it's kind of a pejorative of them, but they remind people of praying mantises, and that whenever they're seen with tall grays or the short grays or the reptilians at all, they seem to be in charge. They're constantly giving telepathic commands of how do they deploy, et cetera. And
when have they been seen?
That they've been seen there in that Sedona base.
Yeah, but
for
when?
Example. Let's see here. We're in 2024 now. It was probably 2018 or so,
and 2017.
That Melinda Leslie is one of the witnesses who has seen them.
Who's she?
She's a person who's an abductee that was taken into custody by them in a MyLabs operation.
A MyLabs operation.
It was a military operation. Masking as an abduction. Stephen Greer has talked about that. It's one of the things that Stephen and I agree upon, that there are such things, that there have been efforts undertaken by United States military personnel to mimic abduction, UFO abductions.
Okay, so this was a mimicked abduction.
That's right.
That she was abducted
That's right.
for.
That's right. And she was taken to that base.
What base?
The base outside of Sedona. The one by the secret mountain wilderness.
That's
area.
not S4.
No. That's in Nevada.
Okay.
That's S4 in the Area 51. S4 is about 11 miles away from Area 51, but they're both in Nevada.
So she's taken to this base by Sedona.
And what they're doing is they were doing experiments trying to discern people's psychic abilities. That there's a major program that's going on in the United States military, because their pilots were unable to fly these things because they're flown by telepathy. The craft are flown by telepathy.
Yeah.
And the pilots, the kind of people that are trained to be pilots, are not telepathically trained. They're extraordinarily linear, very, very intense, scientific, logical, positivist type folks, in that they aren't able to communicate with the craft. And so that there's been a whole program to try to recruit people, to try to find out people who are psychic, to see whether they can actually be involved in helping to run these craft, because the craft are run psychically by the ETs. And so unless they have ET people working with them, which it appears they do at the Sedona base, that the ET people are the ones that actually pilot the craft, the large craft. But that they're given U.S. military escorts with F-18s and the major helicopter gunships actually protect them when they're flying some of these.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so she allegedly saw them in 2017, 2018 when she was taken to this base, and they were down there and they were being interrogated.
They were being experimented with. They were asked to do these experiments of psychic experiments.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. And there's lots of information about that now, about this weird program that they've got going of trying to recruit people that they think are psychic because their normally trained pilots are not able to fly these things.
It's almost like a Men in Black kind of thing, like when we see in the movie where they have the base and they go in there and all the aliens are chilling and stuff. That's effectively a similar parallel to what's being described.
There's lots of weird science fiction movies all over the place, picking up little pieces of this stuff. That what we do is that I tend not to go to those kind of movies, but because I'm kind of staying focused on.
You're too wired in, Danny.
Right. I'm trying to stay focused on what it is I know. That's why it's easy to remember these things.
Yeah.
Because I don't garble it up with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't read fiction. About these things. I just refuse to do that. I refuse to go to movies that have bad galactic politics, that are that are into bumming people out about making up terrible things about ETs and stuff, like they're here to eat you and all that stuff. You don't want to poison your mind with that. I don't go to vampire movies or werewolf movies or disembowelment movies. I stay away from those kind of things.
You're not a Twilight guy?
No. Well, no. So there's lots of information about this now, and there's this extremely interesting phenomenon that has started, as you know. That back in 2017, December 17th of 2017, you have the front page story in the New York Times that Leslie Kean and Blumenthal wrote, exposing the existence of a top secret program inside the Pentagon engaged in professionally investigating the UFO phenomenon. Okay, and they reveal that, and they had some things a little missed in that report.
Like what?
Yeah, like for example, that they thought ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was a lot more formalized than it really was. But Lou goes at some length here. Yeah, isn't
your
Lou,
client Lou Elizondo?
Lou Elizondo has written this book. It's his for the last 3 weeks has been the #1 bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list. That he goes into detail now about how ATIP kind of evolved out of OSAP, the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program, and how he was doing this kind of informally, and et cetera. But so he's clarified all of that in his book.
We had him in here for episode 237.
Right.
It was a very fascinating conversation. I think we're trying to do another one in November because there was a lot still on the bone there. One of the things that I think, and I want Lou to talk about this in November just so he can kind of once and for all make it clear. But one of the things I think that's confused people in the past with how he's explained it, because again, there was a lot of moving parts here.
Yes.
Is that he's said things like, "Oh, I wasn't a part of OSAP," because it seems like he's making the assumption that OSAP, when he was first being read into this stuff in 07 or 08, OSAP was transferring into what became ATIP. Is that now the timeline shows that maybe that didn't happen until 2012, 2013, 2014, and then some people on the more skeptic side argue that like you can't even find data in the FOIAs that ATIP was real. When did ATIP? When was that born, as far as you know? Maybe that's the best place to start.
Well, I would actually say that it wasn't born. It was conceived of. That you can read the stuff in the book, the details of what he talks about. But what happened is that there was an original program that was the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program. That the funding, the original $22 million that Harry Reid, got authorized. Yeah. Senator Reid got authorized. That was a program that was designed to do two things actually. One was to try to figure out how to back engineer the craft that had been recovered, but it was a more public, even though top secret. It was a more well-known program inside the Pentagon than the actual deep program, where they were involved in knocking down UFOs and actively, aggressively going after them.
Knocking down.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. This is not just a passive program where they just wait and see if there happens to be a crash of a UFO. We're not talking about they've admitted quote crash retrieval organizations,
Yes.
but they were actually knocking them down. They've developed technology to knock some of these things down, and they've engaged
like
in
EMPs and stuff.
Yes, it's an extraordinarily powerful technology, we'll call it, that is capable of disabling the craft and forcing them down.
Isn't that a little like this is where I get confused, and it gets beyond what my brain can really create, because it gets to questions that are beyond the known laws of physics that we have. But like you talked earlier about the Drake equation and the conservative estimate of there being 2 to 6
Yes.
potential civilizations, and you use numbers like potentially 8 billion years ahead or something like that.
Yeah.
So when I hear things like that, I do wonder how a civilization, let's say they're even 1 billion years ahead, not 8, how they could possibly be stopped by some caveman or less than that technology like EMPs, I'm assuming based on our timeline that we have.
It's an extraordinarily sophisticated technology that's been developed to take them down. Now that doesn't mean that they haven't compensated for that. But there were a number of the vehicles that were recovered, intact vehicles that were forced down by this technology. And so what I'm saying is that this wasn't a passive, just go find one that happens to have accidentally crashed, gotten hit by lightning or something.
It's an act of intergalactic war.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. That's one of the major concerns about this, that this would be considered a potential act of war against them, because our military people were considering it an act of war for them to come and shut off our nuclear missiles.
Yes.
And so that they viewed that as a kinetic act, as they referred to it, against our forces. And so they engaged in kinetic actions against the craft, and that they've brought some of them down.
And so you're saying that this program that was in charge of that was far deeper and more classified than, say, OSAP.
That OSAP was what Senator Reid, in a way, did, and they authorized the funding for a $22 million program to kind of investigate it at kind of another level, strictly for trying to figure out if there was any kind of access they could get to the technology for weapons development. It was an advanced weapons program. But the fact of the matter was there was a much deeper weapons program, a classified weapons program that involved the kinetic activity going after the craft in the attempt to back engineer them.
Do we know how far back that went, and or who was in charge of it?
We know. I don't know the exact date yet as to when this new technology got developed, the ability to force them down and to recover the intact craft. We know that it exists, and we know that it was formulated. We know that there was another highly sophisticated program that was developed by the Central Intelligence Agency that was called the Golden Domes program. That was a technology that was actually able to discern the craft when they were still masked. They were still cloaked, and that the CIA developed a technology that was able to locate them.
Wow!
Yeah, and then there was an entire center that the Central Intelligence Agency had controlling that.
When was this?
This has been going on for over 10 years. Now
Pre-OSAP or now?
This was pre-OSAP.
Okay, so that would mean maybe like late 90s, something like that starts.
Yeah, and so that the bottom line is that this activity, this aggressive activity toward the craft, is a great source of concern, and it's part of what they're so concerned about quote catastrophic disclosure.
Yeah.
Being able to reveal that the national security state apparatus has taken it upon itself to engage in activities that could be perceived as an act of war against this civilization. In making up their own mind that, well, them having shut off our nuclear missiles was an act of war, and so therefore they thought that they were entitled to retaliate against them. That whole kind of activity going on outside of the control of Congress, is contrary to the Constitution of the United States. The United States government and the Congress is supposed to be in charge of making decisions as to whether we're going to engage in acts of war toward a foreign power. They've got all kinds of efforts that have been made by the Covert Operations Division of the CIA, the 5412 Committee of the National Security Council, to take it upon themselves to take initiatives under the Covert Operations and the Intelligence Act that they've done. But the bottom line is that in my judgment, this is not constitutional. That they are committing perjury, they're lying to the United States Congress, they're conducting military operations against the craft that would be considered an act of war, and so therefore that there is some strong reason to believe that they've engaged in some sort of communication, which is designed to establish some sort of set of protocols pursuant to which they engage with each other. The craft are clearly engaging in activities that are viewed as surveillance. That they're surveilling our nuclear aircraft carriers, our nuclear submarines. They're monitoring places where our nuclear weapons are stored. They're monitoring our private nuclear facilities, energy facilities, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So they're engaged in a very effective surveillance system about our nuclear capacities. Now, national security state people immediately experience that as dangerous to have some sort of foreign power, surveilling our top secret facilities, et cetera. Whereas other people on the planet view our activities in developing those major weapons and threatening to use them, in deploying them, and targeting other people with them as being acts of aggression, which they are, and that we know from the from the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance documents, for example, we know that in fact that the United States national security state apparatus is engaged in an affirmative, aggressive program of attempting to establish full spectrum military dominance over the planet, and they've acknowledged it.
When?
This was in April of 1992. That after Gorbachev dissolved the Soviet Union. And secured the agreement.
HW in office?
Yes, with HW and James Baker, both agreeing with Gorbachev to refrain from attempting to recruit any of the the former republics of the Soviet Union that would be released from the Soviet Socialist Republic, to try to refrain from engaging them in recruiting them into NATO or any of the Eastern Bloc countries. That was the agreement. And as soon as Bush Jr. came in, Cheney came in.
Thank you.
They just defied that and started going after them and starting to recruit them into NATO. That's what's generated the present situation that we're in now. Okay, so the bottom line is that. Immediately after Gorbachev signed the release of all of the socialist republics and dissolved the Soviet Union voluntarily pursuant to that agreement, what happened is the Dick Cheney, who was the Secretary of Defense at that time under the Bush Senior administration, and Paul Wolfowitz, and Scooter Libby, and Doug Fife.
All the neocons.
And the guys that were in the Defense Department under Dick Cheney gathered together and they prepared the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document. And in it, they actually proposed that they push back against the inclination to reduce the military budget now that the Soviet Union had voluntarily stepped back from the Cold War. and they said we can't allow this to happen. We have to increase the military budget so that we can establish full spectrum military dominance over the planet. And that the purpose of that is to secure and maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials that are needed by the members of this new Northern Industrial Alliance that we're going to be forming. There's lots of details about that. A lot of people don't know about it, but they exist now. That whole program that has been undertaken by Dick Cheney in his cohorts has been operational now for some time. And the problem is that once they mounted that under the W. Bush administration, in defiance of the previous agreements that have been made, what's happened is it's been quite clear that we have been engaged in an activity that is ever increasing the possibilities of nuclear confrontation with both China and with Russia. And so that you see a major increase in the activities of the UFO vehicles, intensely monitoring our nuclear capacities, the deployment of our nuclear forces, trying to determine, how aggressively we're going to be utilizing our nuclear weapons capacities.
Since 92?
Since 92. That's exactly right.
Because my other question was going to be to tie this back together, I guess, in a way, is these programs you're talking about with crash retrieval and, God, there was so much in there you said. I'm going to miss some of it. But, it's all, when we talk about it, we tend to talk about it from an American-centric view.
Yeah, right.
Right? But other countries, world powers especially, like China, like Russia, they have their own programs that look at this stuff.
Sure.
Is there evidence to show that there is some sort of intelligence sharing on that going on, or that has been going on over the past several decades?
Yeah, the answer to that is negative. It's not. That the adversarial attitude that has been adopted primarily by Cheney and the neocons from the W. Bush administration on down, and was then later endorsed by Obama and Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State.
Birds of the same flock.
That they maintained that same kind of momentum once it was going. What's happened now is that's set up such antagonism with Russia and with China that there's very little cooperation that's going on in this area. And so the United States, the question that arises is what is it that's motivating this new movement that's been happening since 2017? What is it that's motivating Lou and Chris Mellon and Dave Grush and Carl Nell and the other folks that are coming forward and leaning in on drafting this particular bill? This is the bill that got passed by the United States Senate in 2023. This is the 64-page bill that has set up an entire regime to undertake a controlled disclosure of some significant portions of the information that are known about the UFO phenomenon.
Controlled disclosure?
Controlled disclosure. That's what this is. This is the UAP Controlled Disclosure Act. This is what they're planning to do. They have a 7-year period during which they want to reveal some portions of the information and conceal information that they think would constitute a catastrophic disclosure.
Okay.
That's what they're engaged in.
All right. Before we get ahead of ourselves on this, a couple things. Number one, another guy I'd like to get in here is Chris Mellon. I'd like to talk with him and judge him on his own merits. And I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of it too, we associate people and automatically make assumptions about who they are. That said, as a guy, I'm sitting across from you who is very well aware, as you've demonstrated, of, say, some of the Gilded Age families and so on down that's happened where certain powerful factions tend to have their hands on the levers of everything that runs our government. Yeah. When you see a guy like Chris Mellon, who's literally a member of the Mellon family, and I forget, it was like his grandfather, I don't even remember, but
his great-grandfather.
Right, great-grandfather was...
The Mellon Bank.
Yes, but also was involved in the creation of the CIA, Warner, or something like that. Jesse Michaels knows that information, not me, so go listen to him on that.
Yeah.
But Isn't it interesting that he's the guy who's walking the papers out of the Pentagon and going to the New York Times with this? Like, is there a little bit of a tingle that goes off there? Like, why him of everybody?
So no, Chris is an extraordinarily interesting guy. That's for sure, and I think he knows more about the deeper aspects of this program than most of the other people. I do believe that probably there is some correlation between his family background and him being able to be trusted with more of that information. If you go back into the period of Brown Brothers Harriman and the robber barons that the Mellons were part of, and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Harriman family, that elite financial industrial set of families that actually formed Brown Brothers Harriman in a kind of a common investment operation where they choreographed things that we talked about the last time of actually choreographing the creation of the Third Reich and setting up the Third Reich and instigating the attempt to on the part of Germany to establish full dominion over Europe, for example, as the bulwark against Bolshevism. That those are extraordinarily real phenomena. It's quite clear that it's not Brown Brothers Harriman now that have continued that linkage. That the power that once resided in Brown Brothers Harriman when Allen Dulles was the legal counsel for them and George Herbert Walker was the CEO, or Prescott Bush then was the later CEO, that there was a lot more rigid control over that elite group. But the progeny of that are more spread out.
Yes.
But there's still a, I just got back from Yale earlier today, and it's embarrassing, walking around Yale looking at all the kind of preppy, well-washed, polished, aristocratic young kids that are there at Yale still. They're still there. And Skull and Bones is still there.
Yes.
And so there is a lot of that stuff. They're resisting letting go of the kind of covert power that they've had, those wealthy families. Chris Mellon is an extraordinarily sophisticated guy, very subtle guy, is extremely knowledgeable about what it is that's going on. And he would be among the more valuable interviews.
Yeah.
To actually have him being candid about what it is he knows, which he won't be. He won't be revealing as much information as some of the other people would.
Why is that?
Because he knows more than they know. And he's closer to the people that are the legacy group people. Mm-hmm. This is not a pejorative about him. This is, in a certain sense, a compliment.
It's factual.
That he's a more sophisticated person than a lot of the other people that are involved here. So that they're hammering down. I mean, Lou is a tough guy. As you know, I mean, Lou is the armadillo.
Yes,
he's the tough guy, here, and he's pushing forward on this. He's smart and articulate, and a lot more sophisticated than the people in the 2506 Brigade that he hails from. But he is still and he will admit that he's more of a blunt instrument. Involved in this. You get other people like Carl Nell, for example. Colonel Carl Nell is kind of another step into the more sophisticated realm. I mean, he was in charge. He was a major person in the United States Army that was called in to kind of stand up entire units and companies inside the military to perform more effective missions. He was the one that was anticipated to be the original head of Arrow when they were talking about setting that up. So he's a very sophisticated person, extraordinarily intelligent, and is in a certain sense more subtle in many ways than Lou is. Lou will admit that. And Chris Mellon is more sophisticated than any of them. He's the most sophisticated of all of them.
I kind of gathered that.
So he is the person who is probably the most responsible for trying to choreograph this operation in a way that can become effective. And so he's a person of some really substantial substance that one would want to talk with to determine what he's decided at any given point to reveal.
All right. I want to put a pin in the UFO crash retrieval program within the Pentagon because I do want to come back to that, but I want to stay with this for a second.
Yeah.
Because when you use the words, I believe it was controlled disclosure.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. This is where it gets... you kind of have a philosophical debate going on because what I mean by that, I want to know everything, right? Mm. I'm a human being. I'd love to know whatever intelligence we have about whatever the hell is out there.
Well, you think you do. You think you want to. That's because you don't know.
I don't know what it could. Right.
You don't know what it is you don't want to know.
Right. But then I'm saying because I don't know that,
yeah,
I say right now I want to know everything.
Sure.
And everyone else out there listening, I'm sure, says something similar.
Yep.
I also recognize, though, that to the point you just made right there, if there are things that are literally provable behind the scenes that like humanity as a whole couldn't handle, which again, this is now intelligence communities making this determination, which is a slippery slope.
Oh yeah, no.
It's
I don't think they're entitled to do that. You're right.
They may not be, but I could then see a scenario where all these guys, everyone you just named, anyone who's associated with the government, who that's been what their job is, they do have a controlled disclosure where they come out and, people could use the word psyop here and it's fair, but that might be a little strong for what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And they basically tell you some things that are true to obfuscate some things that they don't want to tell you about. Now you represent Lou Elizondo, so I understand there's some things you can't say here, attorney-client privilege, but could you see a scenario where that's very real?
Yeah, I don't think that's the right verb, the obfuscate. If I possess 100 units of information about a particular subject and I reveal 85% of them to you, it's not obfuscating. It's just a limited disclosure.
Yes.
When you obfuscate something is when you release the 85% of the information and then you lie about the other 15%.
But isn't that semantics? That's effectively what they'd be doing if they didn't tell us about. If they said, "Wow, look over here at this shiny thing." Don't look at that over there. Well, that's kind of lying, no?
Well, one just needs to be careful in this particular area. Okay. It's kind of it's not kind of like lying, sort of. That's dangerous territory. What's going on here is an extraordinarily sophisticated process, pursuant to which there are people inside the national security state is a bad idea to begin with. Mm-hmm. When you have a national security state, they're locked into a second paradigm worldview, a dialectical worldview that there's good guys and bad guys, and and we're authorized to do really horrible things. I told you about Henry Kissinger, in his introductory lecture every year in Gov 182, about if you don't believe that our country has the right to lie, cheat, steal, and even kill, on behalf of the narrow self-interest of our own nation state versus others, then you shouldn't remain in my course, that kind of thing. Yeah. That mindset in and of itself is intrinsically evil. It sets up an intrinsic dialectic between portions of the human family that is inevitably going to generate conflict. Okay, and the problem is that you have people that are raised inside that culture in the military and in the intelligence community, et cetera. And they're trained not only to conceal certain information, they're actually trained to actively attempt to deceive others.
Yes.
Okay, and the problem is that they developed those skill sets vis-a-vis some alternative nation states whom they viewed to be adversaries in their quest to establish full spectrum dominance over the planet.
Yeah.
You know, and the problem is that they turn those skills against the American people, and they turn those skills against Congress.
That's right.
And that's unconstitutional for them to engage in that type of activity. In that the creation of the nation state, the national security state in and of itself creates that intrinsic danger. And it's come to manifest itself over the period of the last, 79 years or so since they created it. Okay, in 77 years now since December of 1947. Okay, so that's what we're encountering right now is the inevitable repercussions of a national security state. So you have an entire community of people who believe that they're not only entitled to, but they're obliged to somehow actively deceive the American public, and to deceive Congress. This is violative of fundamental premises of our Constitution, and that we have to undo this. We have to undo this in the context of this particular subject. And so that we want to be careful during the process that we're doing this of being clear about what we're accusing people of doing. That the people here that we're talking about with Lou and the rest of the people that are involved in this endeavor to establish a UAP controlled disclosure campaign plan. Mm-hmm. It is clear that they're at one and the same time attempting to reveal some things and intending to have other things not revealed. Okay.
And what do you think what do you think the highlights of those things not revealed are? That they don't want to reveal? Like what kinds of things on a high level?
Some of the things are more obvious and are less troublesome because they're so obvious. For example, they'll say, first of all, we have to make sure that whatever the disclosure process is, that it does not alter the present elements of power on the planet. Well, now you can either agree or disagree with that. Right. I tend to disagree with that. I don't think the elements of power on the planet right now are doing that well.
I agree.
Bringing us to the brink of thermonuclear war. Well, but they would argue that, that's brinkmanship. You get to the edge of nuclear war, and then you end up, getting, you just get to dissolve the Soviet Union. You get to get access to the at least to the major breadbasket areas of the Ukraine, even if you lose the Crimea, the warm water port to Russia. And they engage in this kind of conduct all the time, and they're threatening the potential thermonuclear destruction of the entire planet as the axis on which they apply that particular set of skills. I think that's a really bad idea.
I agree.
I think that our human family ought to step back from that. And then they say, well, it's fine for you to say that because you're not charged with the responsibility, these heavy responsibilities we have, that they say. And it's what I've discovered in my 50 years of practice is what I've discovered is that there's an awful lot of people inside that national security state who have become so disenchanted with what it is that they've been asked to do in order to effectuate this kind of dialectical confrontation that they are ostensibly engaged in, which was at one time, at least in their own minds, attempting to stop, authoritarian governments from the Soviet Union from taking over the world. But when they in fact found themselves supporting authoritarian governments and torturing people and killing people and assassinating people, et cetera, after a period of time, they began to suspect there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
that they're actually doing the very things that they were taught as young people were the very things you're trying to stop from doing in the world. And so that we've been able to establish communication with some of these people, and they're willing to come forward and say, here, let me share some of the information that you need in order to try to reform the national security state apparatus. Okay?
Yes.
that my opinion is the national security state apparatus has to be more than reformed. It has to be overcome. It has to be dissolved. You know, it has to be dissolved in the Soviet Union. It has to be dissolved in China. It has to be dissolved.
How realistic is that, though, Danny?
Well, how realistic is destruction of the whole planet? It's not a really good idea.
I think that's more. Unfortunately, I think that's more realistic than getting all these prisoner dilemma stuck countries, espionage units back, reined in.
Well, I think that that's the challenge that we have, and I think that one of the dynamics that has to play into this is increasing the level of consciousness of the people, okay, and exercising some of the powers that we still have in a democracy, okay. That the avenues are there for us to do this. It's an extraordinarily difficult challenge. I'll agree to that. But we have to know what our ultimate mission is. Our ultimate mission is to dissolve away the structural sources of injustice, inside both Western and Eastern civilizations right now, because the elite that have risen into power in both hemispheres are threatening thermonuclear destruction of the planet.
Yeah.
Okay, they're engaging in the maintenance of control over the petroleum industry and polluting the planet and polluting the oceans and threatening the life-generating capacity of our planet. Okay, they are on the very brink of actually instigating a potential intervention on the part of an extraterrestrial civilization in order to preserve the life-generating capacity of our planet. That's what's happening right now, and that's what's panicking them. So all of a sudden they've come forward saying, "Wait a second, that we think that we're on the brink of some potential intervention here, and if they intervene in an aggressive enough way to shut off our nuclear weapons capacities in both East and West, that's going to reveal their presence, and we aren't ready yet." We haven't really taken the steps that are necessary to prepare our people for the intervention of an extraterrestrial civilization like this. And so you see this thing happening right now, kind of this mysterious process going on of some element inside the national security state coming forward, with the either pretense or at least posture of being good guys all of a sudden.
That's right.
Of that they've seen the light. And that they think, I'm really feeling bad about, how secretive we've been.
Let's tell everyone.
The excesses, but let's make it clear. We're not here talking about revealing everything. We're talking about revealing some things. And there's some other things that we just really can't reveal, but we can't tell you what those are. Under any circumstance, we can't tell you what they are. But one of the things that they'll lead right with is, of course, whatever the changes are that are going to be flowing from disclosure, we can't have them alter the elements of power on the planet right now. That's number one. Okay, that would be, in their view, catastrophic.
Yes.
Primarily because they view themselves as being assigned responsibility for keeping those people in power.
Right.
That's how they view their military covert mission. Okay.
They want to sustain what they have.
That's right. And so there are other things that that one's an obvious one, right?
Of course.
Then they have others like that. Well, there may be some things that have been done on behalf of maintaining the secrets down through the decades. They may have engaged in untoward activity toward private citizens.
They would never do that, Danny.
And that would be catastrophic to reveal some of that, because if you revealed that, then the confidence of the people in that elite would be diminished.
But doesn't it matter like when it was too? Like eventually things like MK Ultra got revealed in some ways, but it was after the fact. So it's like,
but for example, you don't know that at MK Ultra, the two major guys that were protecting the kind of death of people that occurred were Warren Burger, who became the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and Jacob Javits, who became the United States Senator of the state of New York.
Yeah.
You don't know any of that stuff, right? And they say, well, you can't reveal that stuff. Because that would really undermine people's blind confidence in the elite. So you can't do that. So see, they have. That's why the people that are the guardians of the national security state are not the right people to be making these decisions, because they are so wedded to the blind allegiance to the kind of elite that are in charge of the planet right now, in that they're used to the brinkmanship of threatening thermonuclear destruction of the entire planet on behalf of maintaining their continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials, that they view that to be a legitimate mission. So that they really can't be the ones that are making these decisions. All of that will come down to who the people are that are going to be on this 9-person commission. Right, this panel, the board of review,
this sets out.
That this sets out. Now, they clearly are intending to have those 9 people be people made up of the exact same elements that have kept it secret for all
like a
this
Warren
time.
Commission.
Yeah, that's right. And you can't let that happen. And so that what we have to do as citizens, we have to be able to develop a strong enough citizen base of educated people who know how to put pressure on their congressional representatives and senators, et cetera, to be able to make sure that the people that end up getting appointed to that particular commission, are people who are not dedicated to the same kind of preservations that they're talking about. They're not dedicated to maintaining all the elements of power in the exact same position they are now. They're not dedicated to keeping secret whatever some of the excesses are that some people have gone to protect the secrets, et cetera. And if you can get them to start listing the kind of things they think are catastrophic, then what you have to do is you have to say, well, the people that are going to be on this board, cannot be devoted to protecting that kind of information, because that's not really catastrophic. All that really is goring your own ox, in the national security state. And so that your myopia in determining what is catastrophic from what is potentially catastrophic in reality is not to be trusted. Okay, so that the dynamic that takes place once this gets to be passed by the House, this is easy to get passed by the Senate because they passed it unanimously out of the Senate Intelligence Committee. They passed the 64-page bill, with
what's wrong with the House?
The House is the fact that they've got guys like Turner, who is the head of the House Intelligence Committee, who's from the 10th Congressional District of Ohio, where the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is. You got the guy like Rogers, Mike Rogers, over in the 2nd Congressional District in Alabama, where the Redstone Rocket Range is, where they're doing the back engineering training. They've both persuaded Mike Johnson, who's kind of hanging on by the skin of his teeth, of being the Speaker of the House, who can be threatened by any given one person to remove him, that they talked him into refusing to allow the bill to come to a vote. If this 64-page bill that was passed virtually unanimously by the United States Senate were put to a floor vote in the House, we'd have 400 votes to pass this.
But they won't put it to a vote
because a tiny handful of people that are wedded to the aerospace industry, right? But this is eventually going to get passed. I mean, it's clear that the political forces that have come together to make this the proposal that the United States Senate is being proposed by the majority leader of the Senate, with Chuck Schumer, and guys like Marco Rubio, and Mike Rounds, from South Dakota, that this is going to become the law, and it's going to take a few passes to get this done, and it's clear that the struggle is going to be over who the panel is going to be, and who the president is going to appoint to that panel. And so that we know that we have access to the democratic instrumentalities of our government.
What reach does he have? And she said he's the only non-Trump family member that Trump follows on Twitter at the time.
Yeah, you told me. Keep going.